Well,
Okay.
what about we always hear from Israelis, how can we be an apartheid society? We have Arabs. So what was your observation of that in Israel?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty silly. I mean, first of all, that doesn't matter, and second of all, in terms of being so the Palestinians who live in Israel are very much third class citizens.
Now, you have a very interesting background. You're from Flint,
Hmm.
Michigan, and after you graduated from Johns Hopkins, Douglas Murray recently very famously said to Dave Smith, you've never
Yeah.
been. Even before all this, you had been. You worked with an Arab Jewish cooperative in Haifa.
Hmm.
What were your observations of Israeli society then? And does it surprise you the way they've conducted themselves in Gaza? Or does that uh, completely fit with what you saw in Israeli society then? I think that was what, 2006,
It was
around that time?
2004 and five. It was a long time ago. Yeah. So I was there as the second Intifada was winding down. I was like kind of around the corner from a bus bombing, it wasn't the second Intifada had largely been suppressed at that point, and because I worked with an Arab Jewish cooperative that tried to solve problems within Haifa, because Haifa is Israel's only mixed Jewish and Arab city. Um, they didn't actually do anything related to the conflict in the territories. It's all related, obviously, but they didn't do anything
Right,
directly with
right.
that stuff. Um, and so I mostly hung out with Palestinians who live in Israel and with left wing secular Israeli Jews. And I have to be honest, I very much enjoyed my time there because of that. But it was funny because I remember, yeah, I was pretty young. I was 21, 22 years old. And I remember thinking, wow, this place isn't so bad. And so because I was there for almost a year. I was there 9 or 10 months. I can't remember now. And so after a while, I said, I was kind of surprised by how, and talking especially to Israeli Jews, and they're like, no, man, you have no idea. You have no idea what's going on in this society. You have hung out with literally 1% of people here who are not crazy, who have not been.
Mm.
No, I shouldn't say that way. Not that they're crazy implies that there's something like genetically wrong, but that have not been driven completely mad with this insistence on ethnonationalism, this insistence on Jewish supremacy, which is and it turned out they were correct. And once they some of them took me to Hebron, and that was that was an eye-opening moment when you walk. I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but if it would, I don't know if you've been there, but
We haven't, we have
yeah.
not been.
Not being, and I will.
Yeah,
I will
that guy.
never
I don't know
be.
if I don't know if you guys have read that book he wrote on democracies and death cults. I think is the name. It is the dumbest book I've ever written or ever read in my life.
Oh, so you actually read it?
It's oh my god! Don't subject yourself to it. It's horrendous. So
you
I got
don't put
interested.
yourself through enough. You have to read his book. You don't put yourself
well,
in enough harm's
so
way.
I got
You got to read
interested.
Douglas Murray's book.
I got interested in the Israel-Palestine conflict when I was 18, because that was when I started college and the Second Intifada broke out that year. And so I wrote a long review of a book by Alan Dershowitz called The Case for Israel, which is also one of these just unbelievably stupid books. There's this cottage industry of writing complete nonsense about the Israel-Palestine conflict that then is promoted by right-wing think tanks. And like there,
Right.
you could fill up a small library with these books, and they're just unbelievably horrendous. But so then Norm Finkelstein, I got in touch with him, and I ended up helping him editing the parts of his book about Dershowitz called B'nai Chutzpah. But so I'm familiar with this genre of literature. This just like completely nonsensical, just like back then it was based on nothing. Now it's based on tweets. Like it's just completely idiotic. Anyway, but yeah, no. So it's not. Once. So yeah. So I guess the answer to your question is no. I'm not. I'm not that surprised by what the Israelis have done to Gaza since October 7th. But that's also because I knew what they were doing before October 7th. And this is an important point for
Right.
people to understand. Back in 2008 and 9, I think it started in December and ended in January. The Israelis attacked Gaza. It was an attack called Operation Cast Lead, and there was a report by a UN fact-finding commission called it was colloquially called the Goldstone Commission. It was the UN fact-finding mission on Gaza or something like that. But they wrote an article. They wrote a report. It's long. Like it's hundreds of pages long, and it came out in maybe September of that year, September of 2009, and maybe November. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But in that the famous line that's quoted from that report is that the Israeli operation that started in December and ended in January was a deliberately disproportionate attempt to punish, humiliate, and terrorize a civilian population. That's the line that gets quoted all the time. But the second part of the sentence goes on, or the paragraph goes on, and it says, and to deliberately and permanently undermine their ability to provide to themselves the necessities of life in Gaza. That was the point of the operation. Yes, it was to humiliate and terrorize people. There's no doubt about that. But it was really to just destroy Gaza and to make Gaza an uninhabitable place. The UN started writing reports after, Israel attacked Gaza every other year, basically, from 2004 to 2023. In fact, it even attacked Gaza in 2023 in May, which nobody even knows about. But as Operation Shield and Arrow or something like that. But the next major attack on Gaza was 2014. That was Operation Protective Edge. And after that attack, Sara Roy, who's certainly the world's leading expert on the Gaza Strip, she's a professor of Middle Eastern, or professor of something, I don't know what, at the Middle Eastern Center, the Center for Middle East Studies at Harvard. She wrote a very good book called The Gaza Strip that people should read. But in her introduction to the latest edition of that book, which she wrote after the 2014 war, she wrote that I have never before seen the human, physical, and psychological devastation that I now see in Gaza. And she said that people had actually lost hope for the first time in her, and she has a long experience there. She's been going there since the 80s, if I remember correctly. She said people have now actually lost hope that peace with Israel is even a theoretical possibility. But she went on to say that the 2014 war dealt, I think the way she phrased it was something of a death blow to Gaza's economy. And that's basically correct. Since then, about most of the population, I think it was 80%, has been dependent on humanitarian aid just for survival. There's been something like 60% youth unemployment, 50% total unemployment. There had been an epidemic of suicide increasing regularly since 2014. In 2018, your listeners probably know this already, but in 2018, the Gazans organized this thing called the Great March of Return, where every Friday, for I think almost 2 years, they marched to the border with Israel, which is demarcated by a fence. And for the first 6 months, the UN wrote a long report on this. For the first 6 months, it was actually a festival. It was a protest. It was certainly a political protest. There's no violence. There's no burning of anything. Literally nothing. It's just a festival. There's a celebration of Palestinian culture, of Palestinian food, of music, of dancing, things like this. Well, what did the Israelis do? They lined up, they built berms, large earthen mounds, and they lined up snipers, and they just, for 6 months, just shot people dead. No one was posing the slightest danger to them at all. Nothing that happened after October 7th is new. None of it is new. It was kicked up to 11. There's no doubt about that. But none of it's new. This is it. They just saw an opportunity to just accelerate what they had already been doing.
Wow.
And I keep saying, just to be clear, when I say Israel, I should always, every single time, without exception, say the United States and Israel, because it is 100% a joint operation. Everything the Israelis do is a joint operation with the U.S. If we don't like anything they do, we immediately tell them and they immediately stop. That's been shown 1,000 times in the past.
Okay. Well, what about, we always hear from Israelis, how can we be an apartheid society? We have Arabs. So what was your observation of that in Israel?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty silly. I mean, first of all, that doesn't matter. And second of all, in terms of being, so the Palestinians who live in Israel are very much third-class citizens. They are actually, there's a book on this topic called "Citizens Without Citizenship." If anybody's interested in reading it, and there's actually plenty of discussion or plenty of literature on it. B'Tselem wrote a report. B'Tselem is Israel's major human rights group. Right. They wrote a report back in, I think, 2016, maybe, or no, actually, it was later, maybe 2021, something like that, a few years ago. It was 2021, and they just asked, what is going on between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea? What is this setup that we have? And what they concluded is that this is a regime. There is a single sovereign, a single state between the Mediterranean and the sea, or excuse me, between the river and the sea. It's Israeli sovereignty, and it is organized on the principle of Jewish supremacy. And that does not, it does, it's true that the Israelis, or the Palestinians with Israeli citizenship have more rights than the Palestinians in Gaza. Nobody would deny that. But that's hardly an argument to say why Israel is not an apartheid state. That's completely silly. Every human rights group in the world agrees that Israel is an apartheid state. Ariel Sharon described the West Bank as a series of Bantustans. Who's the general? Giora Island describes Gaza as a massive concentration camp. So if you've got a state which is controlling Bantustans in a massive concentration camp where 80% of a certain ethnic group happens to live, I think it's pretty obvious that state is an apartheid state. It doesn't require a lot of explanation.
Come see us on tour in Glasgow, Manchester, Belfast, Dublin, Liverpool, Birmingham, and London. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.